This is Top Landing Gear.
Cleared for takeoff.
Pull up. Pull up. Pull up.
Hello and welcome to the second of our two-stage full flaps interview with the legendary Martin Withers. In part one, Martin spoke in depth about flying Vulcan XM607 on the Black Buck raids during the Falklands Conflict in 1982. Well, Martin retired from the RAF as squadron leader in 1991 and joined the airlines. However, in 2007, one very unexpected and hugely welcome opportunity was to come his way that he could never have foreseen, to be one of the display pilots on the last remaining airworthy Vulcan XH558. Operated by the Vulcan to the Sky Trust, it gave years of thrilling displays at air shows all over the UK, many of them flown by Martin. It was an immensely proud and enjoyable time for him to display this magnificent aircraft, which had come to define him. Falklands is over. The Vulcan then eventually gets decommissioned later that year. And then 25 years or so later, you're then displaying the last remaining Vulcan XH558. That must have been a lovely period of flying for you, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. No, it was great fun, and a great honour to be allowed to fly this thing in a way that we were never allowed to fly it in the RAF.
Did you ever roll it like Rolly Falk did? And many others, I gather.
Oh, well, Rolly Falk was called Rolly because he rolled everything. I mean, the Victor, they rolled it and they did roll off the tops. And
Yeah.
In fact, well, the early Vulcan did roll off the top, probably a very light one. Because this was part of the Canberra, for example, that used to be its standard way of toss bombing a nuke. It would go up like that, and then at some point here, it would launch this thing, and then it goes back the other way. So it was presumed because the Canberra could do it, and the V-bombers could probably do it.
Yeah.
And they could. But it's... no, I mean, the displays were absolutely great. Dave Thomas, who was the original sort of display pilot who'd flown it in. Now, you know the story of how they formed the aircraft was flown from 82. The tankers carried on for another year because the Victors were still down south while they were rebuilding the building the runway at Mount Pleasant on the islands. And so they needed more tankers on the east coast just to defend against Russian nonsense as they were bringing the bears in all the time.
Yeah.
So that's why we had the tankers for a while. But then the AEW Nimrod was supposed to be coming into service at Waddington, but the whole thing was a disaster. You remember it had the nose had a great big lip.
Yeah, the Ferranti radar problem, wasn't it?
That's right. And then they had the other part of the 360 degrees down the back, and it worked perfectly on the ground. And then when it got airborne, they found that it didn't work because they hadn't counted the fact that the whole fuselage flexed. So if you have one going round, they then tried to correct it by the use of software and so on. But in those days, the size of a computer was the size of a fridge freezer. So it required more. It generated so much heat inside the aircraft. They had to put extra heat coolers in and things like this. And it ended up there wasn't room for the crew just about. So that's a slight exaggeration, maybe. But anyway, it was considered to be a disaster. I knew the test pilot was given the job of displaying it at Farnborough when it came out, and he was so disgusted with it that he flew down the runway and then just went behind the crowd line and disappeared.
Really? Gosh.
Poor old Nimrod.
Yeah.
That was scrapped. But what had happened at Waddington was that they'd got the whole place geared up for that aircraft. They'd got the simulator built for it. They got all the jigs and the tooling and everything for it. They were training people up, basically on the it wasn't Nimrod. But anyway, it was then scrapped.
Yeah.
So they, rather than send everybody away, they had to find. They didn't want to uproot all the people in their houses and everything there. So, because they knew they would want them about 2 years later when the AWACS came in.
Yeah.
But they had 2 Vulcans left behind just for the trade training and for the people to get practice, for the engineers just to keep their hand in and people to get qualifications and one thing and another. And they were taking them out and taking them to bits, putting them together again. And some bright spark thought it was a good idea to actually fly them. And in those days, it was possible to run this operation as making it as a display aircraft at almost zero cost. So they said, because the way things were budgeted in those days, you didn't have cost centers and you didn't have all the rest of it. If you wanted fuel, you just got fuel. And if somebody landed and they wanted fuel, give them fuel. And I don't think there were any bills being transferred. There may be from one place to another. And then they were done at no cost with wages because everyone was on, full-time work, and they got volunteers to work at weekends and do all this. And they got some sponsorship from Shell. But that they sort of probably magnified far more than they got. They got some, and they had a little Shell barrel in the Bombay because they're not allowed to show your sponsors on the outside.
Right.
But anyway, that came to an end when in '92, I think.
Yeah.
When they did have to spend some money on the thing, and also the accounting had changed and realised it was actually costing a lot of money to do. And so that was the aircraft. That was 558, which was flown in to, what was it? Not Bitterswell.
Bruntingthorpe.
Bruntingthorpe. And they did lots of runs in it and things. And then Robert Fleming was behind it, gaining support from the original manufacturers, and then the CAA to possibly get it airborne again. And then several £1 million later, it did get airborne again. And quite early on, in about 96, I got invited to come and meet Robert Fleming, selected by Dave Thomas, who'd been the guy who'd been displaying it and who actually flew it into Bruntingthorpe. And so I was sort of put on the list. At the time, they thought they were going to get Jaguar as a sponsor. I thought I'd be getting my own Jaguar. But that never happened.
Sadly.
But it was, and then it finally came to fruition. The first test flight was done by Dave Thomas, and my memory of her name is just gone. But anyway, and another test pilot who had been a display pilot on the Vulcan. And then I was the then sort of other pilot who I flew with Dave on several of the flight tests, and then did a sort of Kev Rumans joined after that. Then I was the only one to get qualified as a display pilot, as well as Dave, in the first season. And then Dave Thomas resigned, And to this day, I don't know really why he resigned. But something, I think he did it more as a matter of principle, but what it meant. But I was quite pleased because I ended up as the only display pilot and therefore the chief pilot. And we did have a sort of ops, OC ops, if you like to call it, Mike Pollitt, who is just recovering from bowel cancer at the moment, but he seems fine. So I started off at the start of the 2008 season as the only qualified display pilot. But again, a bit like being thrown in at the deep end with the airlines with me. I told you I went straight in as a captain. Didn't really know what was expected of an airline pilot. Then it was a bit the same with me with air displays, because I'd hardly even been to an air display and got the rules. So I did get into trouble once or twice because out in Belgium, I took off and then just turned over the crowd, at least to the end of the crowd, to position for my run-in. And I sort of, I wasn't displaying, I was just flying to the thing. But I, generally speaking, kept my nose clean with the CAA and everything. And then after that, we built up the team, who by the end were getting all the good flying, because I was invited to fly fly with the Red Arrows earlier. I went to Farnborough, that's right. And I went along to talk to the Reds, and they were just speaking to me as though I was, really as good as one of them, should I say. And I hadn't done any formation for about 18 years.
Since the Victors.
Since the Victors, exactly.
That was with Victor, yeah. And but anyway, fortunately, I was flying with Phil Odell, Pod. I think everybody's heard of Pod.
Yeah.
Set the recent world record in he's the chief test pilot for Rolls-Royce. And we got him on board because everybody wants him to fly their aeroplanes, really, because he's just such a natural. And he'd only done a few trips. I think it was about his 4th trip or something like that. And I was flying with him with the Reds. And I was supposed to be doing the flying. But they were running late. And we were doing a sort of cross track so we could see them coming and then we could just join on where they were. But by the time they came, they were very definitely on his side, not mine. So I said, "Can you see them?" "Yeah," because I couldn't. So I said, "Do you have control?" And he just joined up in no time flat. The first, we told the Reds, their normal turn is to roll when it's sort of going left. Now,
Yes.
you roll for 6 degrees and pull 2G, but it's like that, and they're doing 300 knots. But they said for us, they'd just roll to 45 degrees. But they didn't roll any more. So it'd be easy left, So I was thinking, easy left. So good thing I wasn't flying it, because Pod was rarely say, easy left, go. He was in there with it,
Yeah.
So I had a little go as I flew over the top, so I flew.
Those displays, Martin. My daughter is now 14, and every year we went to Dunsfold, and she was, half the age she is now probably, and every year we'd wait patiently. And quite often you wouldn't turn up because you'd gone tech on the way, or there's a fuel leak or something, and the crowd would cry, and my daughter would cry, and it would rain at Dunsfold because it always rained at Dunsfold.
It always had bad weather at Dunsfold.
Always bad weather. And then when you did, on the days that you did come, it was I know you will probably know this, but and you've probably heard this a million times, but it was unbelievable. It was breathtaking, jaw-dropping, made your heart race, made the hairs stand up on your back of your neck, as much as any aircraft I've ever seen. And I have to say, I know you did a couple of private displays at Dunsfold, and when you did your farewell tour, I actually managed to sneak on to the airfield by hook or by crook and a bit of jiggery pokery, and watched you coming in. I filmed it on my. I can't remember if you flew. I think you did fly that flight on your farewell tour, but I remember standing there and you did a few circuits around the airfield, and there was nobody else there. It was just because no one knew you were coming. Apart from there were quite a few people at the gate, and I'd sneaked in. And I remember thinking, this is terribly sad. This is the last time I'm ever going to see this. And I did listen. I had the app on my phone, and I listened. I followed your very last flight, aircraft up and aircraft down and engines off. I thought, that's it. It was desperately sad. And I don't know how you feel, but I still miss it terribly. Yeah. And I'm just a guy who likes airplanes. You flew it. And do you miss it? And did you love it?
Oh, no, I did love it. And we got such a kick out of it, and the fact that people like yourself enjoyed seeing it so much and sort of giving these people credit. I still remember in early days of displaying, we didn't even have a proper sequence worked out. You sort of just did it to suit an airfield. You'd start here and do only a certain limited number of manoeuvres you can have. But we sort of experimented with different things.
There's a theme here, all the way from Black Buck, all the way through Martin is smiling at the moment, for those who can't see.
Yes. Barely.
Well, I haven't got any secrets anyway,
Well, Roland's told us all your secrets, so yeah.
Oh. Martin, we ought to let you go, but listen, thank you so much for telling us all about the history of Black Buck, for talking to us about the Vulcan, and thank you for all the joy you've given us, as Jez said, at the displays with the XH558. We have loved those.
Yeah, well, that was my pleasure, it was so lovely. What was very sad on the last flight was, if you saw the really last flight
the very short hop.
Yeah. We've got all the plans to have a big do to say farewell to it, and to invite people who would possibly be good for sponsoring us in the future. And we almost casually told the local police and fire service and everybody what our plans were. And it was just a sergeant who came along from the police on day one and took all this in, but it was all supposed to happen only about 3 weeks later when this conversation went. And so we then got a call. We wanted another meeting and it was a much more senior policeman who turned up, and the sort of head of the local fire service, who basically said, right, okay, what you're doing is a public event, and we're responsible for it. And if the roads start getting blocked and we can't get emergency vehicles in or out, we'll close the airport. Now, obviously, if they close the airport, and they said we would be liable, and it was just ridiculous. We just couldn't have the option. And they said, if we see it appearing on social media that it's happening, then we will make you scrub it.
It caused a lot of upset, didn't it?
So it did. So we had this little flight, but we had to do a last flight sort of thing. But it was done in complete secrecy. I thought it sort of told, and I followed it to the letter, and I didn't tell some of the crew it was even happening. So
that's also a theme that runs through.
I wasn't very popular about that, but I did bring my family, my wife and 2 children, and we had this. The day started badly because the weather was just awful.
This is from Robin Hood, was it? Donker?
Robin Hood, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was flying with Bill Ramsey and we had 2 AEOs down the back, just for get a jolly. Because we only had the 2. We let them both fly on that one. But none of us wanted to do it because it was not what we wanted to do. The weather was awful. The airport said, "Well, you've got to get it done by 1 o'clock, otherwise that's too late," or something like that. And so 1 o'clock came, and we thought, "Well, that's it. Okay, let's go." And then they said, "Oh, no, we can give you till 3 o'clock," or something like that. And the weather was just clearing up around 3 o'clock. The cloud was quite a lot of cloud around, quite low cloud. But we thought, well, if we can go, we've got to do it. But really, we couldn't have cared less about doing that last night.
End to
but because it was, we'd rather say we've had it and it's been good. But Bill Ramsey and I shared the flying. He did the takeoff, I did the landing, and then the bit in the middle we just did. He did the takeoff, and I took it down and brought it down to pretend to land.
I remember, yeah.
And then I actually went round at the last minute, so everybody was going with tears in their eyes, thinking it was a landing. Then we went round again. Some lovely bits of photography taken from it because we're skimming through bits of cloud and getting lots of stuff off the wings. And then Bill came round and did a touch and go. Again, sort of brought it right down onto its wheels and then put the power on and went off again. And then I took it round for the final landing. No, that was very, very sad. But then afterwards, the photographers said to us, "Well, you're going to do this, going to do this." And so the others all did put their hands up like this with a big grin on their face. I don't know if it's because I was deaf or lazy or what, but I didn't do that. And I was very pleased I didn't do that because it looked as though everyone was rejoicing for the last flight. But as it happened, we'd enjoyed the flight. And sadly, that was it.
And it's all been a bit of a sad tale since then, hasn't it, for the poor old girl?
Yeah. It's, I was there on Monday, last Monday, doing some recording for the BBC.
But people still love it. People are still interested in it. My name is under the wing or in the bomb. My wife paid for my name to go there. I've never been to see her, so I want to go up there and see her and give her a pat on the nose or on the wheel, and if we can get anywhere near her.
She still looks lovely.
Yeah.
Martin, I think we're there. Thank you so much.
I know. Well, it's nice to meet you all.
Oh, it's super to meet
Thank you, Martin.
so much, Martin.
It's a real honour to talk to you. I've read about you for so long and heard your name at so many displays that it's a real pleasure. Like Roy said, my kids, because I've been banging on about the Vulcan since they were, can remember. My absolutely all-time aircraft. To talk to you today has been a real pleasure. So thank you so much.
Right. I'd just like to finish by saying that I like to stress that what we did with that one bomb on the runway was really quite considerable. That not only did it not become a forward operating base, the morale effect it had on the islanders and the poor little conscripts who didn't want to be there in the first place, who were dug in on the island, must have been really great. And then the fact that the Mirages weren't used, that could have made a great big difference. And so people said, "Are you proud of what you've done?" Well, I'm certainly proud of being part of what was done. It was a real team effort, but it was we did achieve quite a lot by that. And then poor old one bomb Beetham, he was just so angry at the way he was treated and the RAF were treated afterwards. That's it.
Have you been to the Falklands ever? Have you visited Argentina?
Yes, luckily I have. I before I left the RAF, I rang around and got a scrounged ride from a friend of mine who happened to be OC 101 Squadron.
That's handy.
So I got a TriStar down there. I got VIP treatment when I got to ascension, and then definite VIP treatment when I got to Mount Pleasant.
Yeah.
There was a Land Rover waiting to take me down to see Tumble Down and all the rest of it.
Wow.
And see my holes.
You saw your holes.
The craters still there, were they?
Still there, yeah. They're like duck ponds.
That must have been a very strange experience.
And then the next day I was given a trip in a Chinook, which actually took me everywhere.
That must have been the high point of your life, being in a Chinook. Sorry, I have a helicopter thing going on.
I will tell you something. It's one of the most dangerous things I've done.
Yeah.
James flew Pumas, Martin. He's got a thing about Chinooks.
I got myself... I was kneeling beside the little door on the right-hand side. And I went all over there, and I was taking photographs. And it's only when I landed back, I realised everybody else was strapped in.
No. Oh, God.
I hadn't thought to take it. So anything gone wrong, or they, I would have been straight over that. It's only about that high.
The irony! If you'd been killed falling out of an RAF Chinook
in the
onto Port Stanley Airfield. Oh God!
Thank God you weren't.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
I hope we can do this again sometime, because I'm sure you've got a lot more to tell us. And
well, it was a far more enjoyable experience than sitting in front of a camera. Just
quite right.
Well, we'd love to meet and maybe come and shake your hand one day if we're ever up your way, or maybe at standing under the nose of 558 would be amazing.
Yeah,
lovely, Martin.
Much.
You're a legend. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Well, our huge thanks to Martin Withers for taking so much of his time to talk to us about flying the Vulcan, not only displaying XH558, but as you'll have heard in part 1, undertaking the longest bombing run in history at the time when he flew XM607 on the Black Buck raids in the Falklands Conflict in 1982. We do hope you've enjoyed listening, and remember you can hear all our podcasts by visiting our website toplandinggear.com or wherever you normally get your podcasts from. Please do join us again soon. Bye for now.